Reality television promises instant recognition, dramatic storylines, and the illusion of perfect control. But behind the polished edits and explosive moments are lives shaped by fear, anger, addiction, and decisions made far from the cameras. Many of the personalities celebrated on screen were already battling turmoil long before the audience met them. Others unraveled only after fame amplified every flaw. Their paths reveal a world where the distance between stardom and confinement is far smaller than viewers realize. And that raises the central question of this investigation: what hidden pressures pushed these reality figures from televised drama into real consequences that no production crew could rewrite? Before we begin, I want to hear from you. Which reality star do you think had the most unexpected downfall, and why? Leave your guess in the comments before the countdown starts. 15. Amber Portwood. Amber Portwood rose to prominence through a series that followed young mothers navigating poverty relationships and the sudden pressures of adulthood. On screen, she appeared fiery, emotional, and unfiltered, becoming one of the franchise's most talked-about personalities. Viewers watched her struggle to balance motherhood with volatile relationships, public scrutiny, and the emotional wounds she carried from her own upbringing. The show presented her as both vulnerable and explosive, shifting between moments of genuine warmth and scenes marked by conflict. Yet behind the dramatic episodes that made her famous, deeper issues were quietly intensifying. According to verified police and court records, Amber's legal troubles arose from repeated domestic incidents involving partners and family members. Officers responding to calls at her residence documented scenes marked by heated exchanges, broken objects, and visible signs of physical altercations. Reports noted the presence of injuries, emotional distress, and a pattern of volatile behavior that escalated quickly once arguments began. These findings challenged the public perception shaped by the show, revealing a struggle with anger, impulsivity, and untreated emotional trauma that could no longer be contained within scripted narratives or controlled filming environments. One of the most serious incidents unfolded during a confrontation in which authorities observed clear evidence of violence. Witness statements, photographs, and recorded damage painted a picture of a situation spiraling rapidly beyond verbal conflict. The responding officers described Amber as emotionally overwhelmed, struggling to maintain composure even after attempts to de-escalate the confrontation. For the legal system, this episode represented not an isolated outburst, but the latest in a series of dangerous patterns that demanded accountability and intervention. As the case moved into the courtroom, prosecutors emphasized the recurring nature of the incidents and the risk posed to those around her. Defense arguments focused on Amber's long-standing mental health struggles, her efforts to seek treatment, and the immense pressure created by living her most fragile moments under public scrutiny. The judge acknowledged these factors but ultimately determined that a custodial sentence was necessary to protect the individuals involved and to push Amber toward sustained treatment. During her time in confinement, Amber began participating in counseling programs addressing anger management trauma and behavioral patterns rooted in early life instability. Statements from therapists and later interviews indicated a gradual shift in her understanding of the choices that led to her incarceration. While the journey has remained difficult, her story highlights the complex intersection between fame, emotional unraveling, and the consequences of unchecked conflict. Amber Portwood stands as a reminder that reality television often captures only the surface of deep internal battles. Her fall from early stardom to incarceration underscores how unresolved pain can shape destructive decisions when support, stability, and accountability fall out of reach. 14. Ryan Edwards. Ryan Edwards became known to reality television audiences as the charming yet complicated partner of a young mother whose story unfolded across one of the genre's most recognizable franchises. On screen, Ryan alternated between calm detachment and sudden emotional outbursts, creating a dynamic that viewers followed closely across multiple seasons. His role as a father, his strained relationships, and his attempts to regain stability formed a central thread of the show's narrative. But beneath the surface of televised arguments and uneasy reconciliations, Ryan was grappling with addiction and emotional instability that were far more serious than anything revealed in edited footage. According to verified law enforcement and court records, Ryan's legal troubles stemmed from a long pattern of substance-related incidents, probation violations, and dangerous encounters that placed both himself and others at risk. Officers responding to calls involving him documented erratic behavior, impaired driving, and situations in which his addiction had escalated beyond his ability to control. Reports detailed arrests linked to possession, refusal to comply with legal directives, and repeated failures to meet the conditions of treatment and supervision. Each incident pointed to a deepening spiral that reality television could neither address nor disguise. One of the most concerning episodes occurred when authorities located Ryan after reports of a public disturbance. Officers described him as visibly impaired, disoriented, and unable to articulate basic information. Paraphernalia was found in his vicinity, and his physical state raised immediate concerns for his safety. The responding officers determined that intervention was necessary not only due to the risk of self-harm, but also because his actions could endanger individuals nearby. This event, combined with earlier violations, pushed the legal system toward a firmer response. In court, prosecutors emphasized the repeated pattern of unsafe behavior and Ryan's inability to adhere to treatment plans intended to support recovery. Defense attorneys highlighted his long struggle with addiction, his attempts at rehabilitation, and the emotional weight of public exposure. They argued that the cycle of relapse was intensified by constant scrutiny and the pressures of performing a version of himself for millions of viewers. The judge acknowledged these challenges, but concluded that confinement paired with structured treatment was necessary to break the cycle and ensure public safety. During his time in custody, Ryan entered programs focused on detoxification, coping strategies, and long-term behavioral change. Reports from treatment providers indicated periods of clarity, renewed effort, and recognition of the harm caused by years of unstable choices. Yet the path forward remained uncertain, shaped by a history that blended emotional vulnerability with the relentless pressures of public life. Ryan Edwards' story illustrates how addiction can erode stability even under the brightest spotlight. His fall from reality prominence to incarceration reveals the limits of fame, the weight of unresolved pain, and the destructive impact of relying on temporary escape instead of sustained healing. 13. Ronnie Ortiz-Margro. Ronnie Ortiz-Margro emerged as one of the most recognizable personalities in a reality series built around nightlife friendship and the combustible chemistry of a young group living under constant attention. His presence on screen was defined by volatility, charisma, and a cycle of intense emotions that often turned private arguments into headline-making moments. Viewers saw him move between affectionate loyalty and explosive confrontation, creating a dramatic tension that became central to the show's identity. But while the cameras captured only fragments of his personal struggles, the full weight of those issues was unfolding far beyond the reach of television editing. According to verified police and court documentation, Ronnie's legal issues centered on repeated domestic incidents marked by escalating violence, intimidation, and emotional instability. Officers responding to calls involving him described scenes of distress, damaged property, and physical injuries consistent with forceful contact. Reports emphasized the volatile environment surrounding these incidents, including attempts to restrain individuals, prevent escape, or exert control during heated confrontations. These findings revealed a dangerous pattern of behavior that had developed over years and was rooted in deeper issues than the show ever conveyed. One of the most serious episodes occurred during a confrontation in which law enforcement found visible injuries on a partner and evidence of a struggle throughout the residence. Officers noted Ronnie's agitated state, rapid speech, and inability to de-escalate when instructed. Witness accounts described fear attempts to seek safety and an atmosphere of intense emotional chaos. The collected evidence, including medical assessments and physical damage at the scene, pushed authorities to file charges reflecting the severity of the situation. As the case moved through the legal system, prosecutors emphasized the repeated nature of these incidents and the risks posed by Ronnie's inability to manage conflict without resorting to aggression. They presented a timeline showing previous warnings, interventions, and opportunities for treatment that were not fully utilized. Defense arguments highlighted his struggles with mental health stress from long-term public exposure and efforts to enter rehabilitation programs. The judge acknowledged these factors but determined that accountability and structured oversight were essential for the safety of everyone involved. A custodial sentence combined with mandated counseling reflected the court's view of the seriousness of the harm. During his confinement and subsequent treatment requirements, Ronnie faced the consequences of years of unchecked emotional turmoil. Counseling programs focused on anger management, trauma, and substance-related triggers provided a framework for understanding the roots of his behavior. Later public statements hinted at moments of reflection, recognition of past harm, and the desire to break patterns that had defined much of his adult life. Ronnie Ortiz-Magro's fall highlights the painful truth that entertainment often masks the most destructive patterns. His journey from reality fame to incarceration underscores how unresolved emotional wounds intensified by public scrutiny can erupt into behavior that no camera crew can control. 12. Janice Dickinson. Janice Dickinson entered reality television as an already established icon known worldwide for her work as a pioneering supermodel. Her presence on screen carried the intensity, bravado, and unapologetic confidence that had defined her decades-long career. On various reality series, she delivered sharp critiques, flamboyant humor, and emotional outbursts that made her both magnetic and polarizing. Yet behind the glamour, the legacy, and the bold personality she displayed, Janice was navigating long-standing struggles that the public rarely saw, struggles involving finances, addiction, and the consequences of decisions made under mounting personal pressure. According to verified court filings and media records, Janice's legal challenges were linked not to violent conduct or high-profile scandals, but to financial mismanagement that eventually drew the attention of the bankruptcy system. Over the years, she faced mounting debt connected to unpaid taxes, medical bills, and unresolved business obligations. When she filed for bankruptcy, investigators began reviewing her financial disclosures, tax history, and declared income. Reports revealed discrepancies between earnings, expenditures, and the documentation submitted to the court, raising questions about her ability to satisfy outstanding obligations. While Janice did not face criminal charges of fraud or deliberate concealment, the severity of her financial situation created ongoing legal pressure. Documents showed a web of debts that had grown too large to manage, including unpaid professional fees and expenses accumulated during years of instability. Her behavior on reality television often hinted at deeper struggles, moments of emotional volatility, conflict, and exhaustion that reflected a life marked by turbulence far more complicated than her glamorous persona suggested. As the bankruptcy proceedings continued, Janice was compelled to relinquish control over certain assets and adhere to strict oversight aimed at restoring financial order. The court scrutinized her income sources, spending patterns, and contractual obligations. Though she avoided the criminal consequences faced by some reality figures, the legal intervention placed her under significant public scrutiny, revealing the stark contrast between her legendary status in fashion and the precarious financial reality she was facing. During this period, Janice spoke candidly about her struggles with addiction and the toll it had taken on her relationships, career, and stability. She described a life marked by periods of excess emotional collapse and attempts at reinvention that were often overshadowed by unresolved challenges. These interviews offered a rare glimpse into the fragility behind her formidable exterior, showing a woman who had been battered by years of internal conflict and the demands of maintaining a public image. Janice Dickinson's story stands apart from those defined by criminal violence or deliberate schemes. Instead, it reflects how fame trauma and decades of instability can converge into overwhelming financial and emotional collapse. Her journey underscores a quieter but equally painful truth: even icons are vulnerable to spirals that unfold far from the runway and long after the cameras stop rolling. 11. Chumley Russell. Chumley Russell became one of the most recognizable faces on a long-running series centered around a family-owned pawn shop in Las Vegas. His easygoing personality, offbeat humor, and childlike enthusiasm made him a fan favorite from the moment he appeared on screen. Viewers enjoyed the contrast between his carefree approach to life and the more serious, business-minded tone of his coworkers. Over time, his popularity extended beyond the show itself, with merchandise, public appearances, and a growing online presence turning him into an unlikely pop culture figure. But the same impulsiveness that made him entertaining often obscured deeper issues developing outside the workplace. According to verified law enforcement and court records, Chumlee's legal troubles emerged during an investigation unrelated to him, which led officers to execute a search warrant at his residence. What they discovered shifted the narrative surrounding him overnight. Reports detailed the recovery of controlled substances, including quantities of materials consistent with personal use, along with a firearm found in circumstances prohibited under state restrictions. The combination of items discovered during the search immediately raised concerns about judgment safety and the private struggles Chumlee had kept hidden from the public eye. The search and subsequent arrest generated intense media attention, contrasting sharply with the comedic persona viewers had grown accustomed to. It became clear that behind the friendly on-screen character was an individual struggling with emotional distress, substance-related impulses, and an increasingly chaotic personal life. As prosecutors reviewed the evidence, they emphasized the seriousness of the materials found and the legal implications of possessing a firearm while in violation of state restrictions. For a public figure whose fame rested on approachability and humor, the revelations forced a sudden and painful shift in public perception. When Chumlee appeared before the court, his defense team acknowledged the gravity of the incident, while pointing toward his willingness to accept responsibility and pursue treatment. Measures were put in place requiring counseling, monitoring, and compliance with conditions designed to prevent further escalation. Though he avoided a lengthy custodial sentence, the legal consequences served as a stark turning point in his life and career. The experience underscored the gap between his cheerful television persona and the personal struggles that had deepened behind the scenes. In the aftermath, Chumlee sought to rebuild his life with a renewed focus on health stability and personal accountability. Public statements and interviews reflected a more grounded perspective, shaped by the recognition that fame offers no immunity from the consequences of destructive choices. His journey illustrates how easily unresolved challenges can spiral when combined with the pressures of being a recognizable figure. Chumley Russell's story stands as a reminder that behind even the most light-hearted reality personalities are real lives, real vulnerabilities, and real consequences that no camera crew can soften. 10. Tila Tequila. Tila Tequila rose to national prominence during the early era of social media, long before reality television fully understood the power of online influence. Her bold persona, provocative image, and massive online following made her one of the first internet-born celebrities to transition into a televised dating series. On screen, she embodied confidence, rebellion, and emotional intensity, captivating viewers with dramatic confrontations and unfiltered vulnerability. To many, she represented a new kind of fame, raw, unpredictable, and shaped by the rapidly shifting landscape of online culture. But as her popularity grew, the instability behind her public image became harder to ignore. According to verified police reports and legal records, Tila's personal life became entangled in a series of incidents involving domestic disputes, erratic behavior, and conflicts that escalated into legal consequences. Officers responding to calls at her residence documented emotional volatility threats during heated arguments and alarming behavior consistent with significant psychological distress. In several episodes, witnesses described her actions as unpredictable and dangerous, prompting law enforcement to intervene to prevent further harm. These incidents revealed a painful contrast between the bold personality she displayed in public and the turmoil unfolding in private. One particularly serious situation unfolded when authorities responded to a disturbance involving Tila in a state of emotional crisis. Officers found her in a condition that raised immediate concern for her safety and the safety of others, leading them to place her into supervised custody under mental health statutes. The combination of impaired judgment, public outbursts, and escalating instability reflected deeper struggles that fame had intensified rather than alleviated. Her behavior during these incidents, captured in witness statements and official reports, underscored how quickly emotional unraveling can become a legal matter when it threatens public order. As Tila moved through the legal system, prosecutors and mental health professionals emphasized the need for treatment rather than punishment. Court filings focused on her mental state, the risks associated with her actions, and the absence of a stable support system capable of preventing future incidents. The judge ordered supervised care, mandated counseling, and restrictions designed to protect both Tila and those around her. Her confinement under mental health supervision marked a significant moment in her public downfall, shifting attention from her sensational image to the deeper issues that had long gone unaddressed. Following her release, Tila continued to struggle publicly with extreme behavior, online rants, and statements that fueled further controversy. Interviews and social media posts revealed ongoing instability and the difficulty of rebuilding a life overshadowed by both fame and emotional chaos. Her story became less about celebrity and more about the destructive intersection of mental health challenges and constant public exposure. Tila Tequila's trajectory offers a sobering reminder that early internet fame can amplify underlying vulnerabilities rather than heal them. Her journey from online icon to reality star to legal confinement illustrates how fragile the boundary is between notoriety and collapse. 9. Tiffany Cook. Tiffany Cook entered reality television through a series documenting the intense, unpredictable world of unscripted tropes built around relationships, conflict, and the emotional fallout of high-pressure living arrangements. On camera, she portrayed a mixture of confidence, impulsiveness, and vulnerability that made her both compelling and polarizing. Her confrontational exchanges and dramatic reactions often shaped the tone of the episodes in which she appeared, positioning her as a memorable presence within the ensemble. But while the series showcased her emotional highs and lows, it offered only a glimpse into the deeper turmoil and instability that had been building in her life for years. According to verified law enforcement reports and court filings, Tiffany's legal troubles surfaced during a period defined by financial strain, unstable relationships, and escalating confrontations. Officers responding to incidents involving her documented heated disputes that spilled into public spaces, causing concern among bystanders and prompting immediate intervention. Reports described scenes of shouting, aggressive gestures, and erratic behavior consistent with extreme emotional distress. These episodes revealed underlying challenges, including struggles with dependency, impulsive decision-making, and environmental instability that reality television had magnified rather than resolved. One of the most serious incidents occurred when Tiffany became embroiled in a dispute that escalated into a physical confrontation. Witness statements and officer observations detailed visible injuries, damaged property, and an atmosphere in which attempts to calm the situation repeatedly failed. The responding officers emphasized the risk her behavior posed both to herself and to others nearby, leading to immediate detainment. This incident, combined with earlier episodes, signaled a pattern that required stronger legal oversight. As the case progressed through the judicial system, prosecutors stressed the repeated nature of her confrontations and the danger created by her inability to de-escalate conflict. They presented documented evidence of prior incidents, emotional instability, and failed attempts at voluntary intervention. The defense highlighted Tiffany's vulnerable background, her struggles with mental health, and the emotional strain of living under constant public scrutiny. While acknowledging these challenges, the judge determined that a custodial sentence paired with treatment requirements was necessary to ensure safety and promote genuine rehabilitation. During her time in custody, Tiffany entered programs focused on trauma recovery, emotional regulation, and long-term behavioral change. Counselors noted the impact of early life instability and the role that unresolved pain played in her most volatile moments. Post-release statements suggested a more introspective perspective as she acknowledged the consequences of her actions and the difficulty of rebuilding a life shaped by both public exposure and private turmoil. Tiffany Cook's story illustrates how fame can intensify existing vulnerabilities, turning emotional fractures into crises that demand legal intervention. Her journey from reality personality to inmate underscores the delicate boundary between on-screen drama and the real-world consequences that unfold when personal struggles reach a breaking point. 8. Richard Wyatt. Richard Wyatt became known to reality television audiences through a series centered on the operations of a firearms store that blended historical knowledge, craftsmanship, and the culture surrounding weaponry. As the owner and on-screen personality, Richard presented himself as a confident businessman with deep expertise and a long-standing passion for his trade. Viewers saw him navigating customer negotiations, overseeing repairs, and discussing the history behind unique pieces, all with a calm authority that made him a central figure in the program. But behind the polished presentation and the shop's carefully crafted image, Richard was facing growing legal and financial pressures that would ultimately expose serious misconduct. According to verified federal court records, Richard's legal troubles intensified when investigators uncovered violations related to firearms sales and the operation of his business. Prosecutors detailed how Richard continued to engage in transactions despite the shop losing its federal license, a violation that carried heavy legal consequences. Court filings outlined unrecorded sales, improper documentation, and attempts to operate through intermediaries to avoid regulatory oversight. These actions, which bypassed strict federal requirements, created severe risks and drew immediate scrutiny from authorities responsible for monitoring firearm commerce. As the investigation expanded, evidence emerged, showing patterns of concealed transactions and financial irregularities. Prosecutors presented testimony and documentation indicating that Richard knowingly circumvented regulations designed to maintain public safety. The case revealed a stark contrast between the responsible dealer he portrayed on television and the behaviors documented by investigators. The court emphasized that the violations were not random mistakes, but part of a deliberate effort to continue business operations outside the boundaries of federal law. When Richard stood before the judge, the proceedings highlighted the gap between his public persona and the conduct examined in court. The prosecution underscored the risks created by unregulated sales and the necessity of strict compliance within the firearms industry. The defense pointed to his long career personal struggles and the financial hardship that followed the loss of the shop's license. While acknowledging these factors, the judge determined that the seriousness of the violations required a custodial sentence and restitution measures. During his time in custody, Richard confronted the consequences of choices shaped by financial desperation, professional pride, and a reluctance to relinquish the business identity he had built over so many years. The experience revealed the intense pressure faced by individuals who tie their livelihood and self-worth to a single enterprise, and the extreme lengths some may go to preserve it. Richard Wyatt's downfall serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of operating outside lawful boundaries in a regulated industry. His journey from television personality to federal inmate underscores how fame cannot shield anyone from accountability when professional misconduct endangers public safety and violates established law. 7. Matt Brown. Matt Brown became a recognizable figure through a long-running family-centered reality series that documented a group living off the grid in the remote wilderness. His role within the ensemble blended humor, vulnerability, and restless energy qualities that made him both endearing and unpredictable. The camera often captured him wrestling with isolation, emotional turbulence, and the strain of sustaining a rugged lifestyle. While his segments on the show framed him as a free spirit, trying to find direction, they did not fully reveal the depth of the private struggles that were quietly shaping his life. According to verified reports and documented accounts from both relatives and law enforcement, Matt's difficulties were closely tied to long-standing issues with addiction. Over time, dependency intensified into a cycle of erratic behavior, impaired judgment, and periods of emotional collapse. These episodes became increasingly disruptive, prompting family members to seek outside intervention or encourage him into treatment facilities. The instability surrounding his life often spilled into tense encounters, marked by unpredictable reactions and heightened vulnerability, placing him and those nearby at risk. One of the most serious incidents occurred during a period when his dependency reached a dangerous peak. Witnesses described Matt as agitated, disoriented, and unable to regulate his emotions. When officers arrived, they observed visible signs of impairment and behavior consistent with acute dependency, leaving authorities no choice but to intervene. The detainment that followed was not framed as punishment, but as a necessary measure to prevent further harm both to Matt and to the individuals placed in dangerous proximity to his deteriorating condition. As the legal process continued, prosecutors and treatment evaluators emphasized the recurring nature of his dependency and the escalating risks it created. Defense statements highlighted the emotional trauma, intense isolation, and relentless public exposure that contributed to his downward spiral. The judge ultimately concluded that supervised confinement paired with mandatory treatment offered the best chance at breaking the cycle and restoring stability. During his time under structured care, Matt confronted years of unresolved pain that had fueled his dependency. Counselors noted moments of clarity and genuine effort pointing to breakthroughs that revealed a deeper understanding of the emotional wounds driving his behavior. Public updates following his release suggested progress, though the path forward remained uncertain, and shaped by the complexity of rebuilding a life after such profound turmoil. Matt Brown's story underscores how addiction can thrive even under the constant exposure of reality television. His fall from on-screen adventurer to detainee reflects the painful truth that inner battles cannot be outrun, and that survival in the wild offers little protection all from struggles happening within. And here's a question for you. Do you think a life lived in isolation makes personal struggles like Matt's harder to overcome, or does reality fame make everything worse? Share your thoughts in the comments. 6. Latarian Milton entered public awareness long before he reached adulthood, when a childhood incident involving reckless behavior thrust him into national headlines and later into documentary-style programming. His early appearances showed a child who spoke with unexpected boldness, defiance, and a strange mixture of humor and frustration. That moment of viral notoriety followed him for years, shaping how the public viewed him, even as he tried to move forward. Yet beneath the memes and televised segments was a young person growing up amid instability, limited guidance, and patterns of emotional turbulence that would eventually carry him into far more serious trouble. According to verified police reports and documented accounts, Latarian continued to struggle with escalating behavioral issues as he entered adolescence and young adulthood. Officers responding to calls involving him frequently described scenes marked by anger, damaged property, and confrontations that had spiraled beyond verbal conflict. Witnesses recounted moments where he acted impulsively, unable to control emotions that intensified quickly under stress. These episodes revealed a painful continuity. The same unchecked impulses that brought him early attention had matured into dangerous behaviors with real consequences. A particularly serious turning point occurred during an altercation that erupted in a public setting. Authorities arriving at the scene observed signs of physical struggle, frightened bystanders, and an atmosphere charged with volatility. Latarian appeared agitated and unresponsive to attempts at de-escalation, prompting officers to detain him for the safety of everyone present. Reports from the incident documented erratic movement, emotional outbursts, and statements suggesting a deep sense of frustration and confusion. The weight of this confrontation, combined with earlier incidents, signaled that intervention was no longer optional. As the case moved through the legal system, prosecutors emphasized the persistent nature of Latarian's behavioral patterns and the risk his actions posed. They presented evidence of repeated outbursts, prior warnings, and the failure of earlier interventions to bring lasting change. Defense arguments pointed to his chaotic upbringing, the absence of stable support systems, and the long-term psychological consequences of becoming a viral figure at such a young age. The judge acknowledged these factors but ultimately determined that confinement accompanied by therapeutic support was necessary to protect the community and address the root causes of his conduct. During his time in custody, Latarian entered programs focused on anger management, emotional regulation, and trauma recovery. Counselors noted that the structure of the environment provided him with stability that had been missing for most of his life. Observations from treatment providers indicated the beginning of insight into the forces that had shaped his behavior, though the path forward remained complex. Latarian Milton's story underscores the harsh cost of early public exposure and the long-term effects of instability. His journey from viral childhood figure to detainee reveals how unresolved trauma, when left unattended, can evolve into patterns that become increasingly difficult to break, even long after the cameras move on. 5. Antoine Dodson. Antoine Dodson became a viral sensation after a televised interview captured his raw emotion, distinctive delivery, and unmistakable charisma. The clip spread rapidly across the country, transforming him almost overnight from an unknown resident into a recognizable figure. His sudden fame led to appearances on talk shows, reality-style segments, and a wave of online content that turned his expressive personality into a cultural phenomenon. Yet this burst of attention masked a far more complex reality. Behind the humor, confidence, and quotable moments was a man shaped by long-standing instability, emotional strain, and the pressures of supporting a family under difficult circumstances. According to verified law enforcement reports, Antoine's legal troubles emerged during a series of domestic incidents marked by escalating conflict and emotional volatility. Officers responding to repeated calls at his residence described scenes of heated arguments, damaged property, and behavior that placed those around him at risk. Witness statements emphasized sudden shifts in mood, moments of intense frustration, and confrontations that spiraled rapidly out of control. These episodes highlighted the stark contrast between his lighthearted viral persona and the private struggles unfolding behind the walls of his home. One of the most serious incidents occurred during a domestic dispute that escalated into physical aggression. When officers arrived, they found visible injuries and signs of a struggle consistent with forceful contact. Reports noted Antoine's agitated state, difficulty responding to instructions, and emotional distress that made de-escalation efforts challenging. The gravity of the situation, combined with earlier domestic calls, led authorities to determine that immediate detainment was necessary to protect all parties involved. As the case progressed, prosecutors pointed to the recurring nature of these confrontations, emphasizing that the pattern posed a significant risk if left unaddressed. They presented documentation of prior incidents and highlighted the need for structured intervention. The defense argued that Antoine's behavior was the product of overwhelming stress, financial strain, and the long-term effects of living in unstable conditions. They noted that sudden fame had provided visibility, but not security, and that the pressure of public attention often amplified his emotional challenges. The judge reviewed both perspectives, but ultimately concluded that time in custody paired with mandatory counseling and supervision was necessary to ensure safety and address the underlying issues driving the conflicts. During his confinement, Antoine participated in programs targeting anger management, emotional regulation, and trauma recovery. Counselors noted that he slowly began to understand the roots of his reactions, particularly the unresolved stress that had compounded over many years. Antoine Dodson's story is a reminder that viral fame can obscure deep-seated struggles rather than relieve them. His journey from internet icon to detainee illustrates how quickly public attention can fade while personal battles continue to grow, and how emotional turmoil, when left unaddressed, can ultimately lead to legal consequences that no amount of visibility can prevent. 4. Angela Stanton. Angela Stanton entered reality television as a figure already carrying the weight of a turbulent past. Unlike many cast members who encountered legal trouble after achieving fame, Angela's story began with hardship long before cameras entered the picture. On screen, she appeared outspoken, unfiltered, and deeply committed to telling her version of events, traits that made her both compelling and controversial. Her presence in an Atlanta-based reality series built around personality clashes, alliances, and the pursuit of influence introduced audiences to a woman shaped by betrayal, survival, and a long fight to rebuild her life. According to verified court records, Angela's legal downfall began years earlier, when she became involved in a scheme centered on the theft and fraudulent resale of luxury vehicles. Prosecutors described an operation in which stolen cars were retitled and funneled through a network of associates before being sold for profit. Witness testimony and investigative findings identified Angela as someone who helped transport vehicles and assisted in steps designed to hide the origins of the cars. When the operation unraveled, multiple participants faced charges, and Angela received a custodial sentence that deeply affected her family life, finances, and emotional well-being. Confinement forced Angela to confront the consequences of choices shaped by unstable circumstances and misguided trust. After her release, she sought to reclaim control over her story by writing a memoir that described the manipulation, exploitation, and emotional trauma she believed had drawn her into the scheme. The book sparked public attention and controversy by naming individuals she accused of influencing the events that led to her arrest. These accusations triggered a long and bitter dispute that later resurfaced on reality television, fueling some of the most intense confrontations in the series. On screen, Angela's past became a frequent source of tension. Cast members questioned her credibility, challenged her narrative, and pushed her to defend the painful chapters of her life. The dynamic created volatile scenes in which old wounds were reopened for millions of viewers. Angela's willingness to confront her history head-on set her apart from others, but it also reignited debates that had long lingered beneath the surface of Atlanta's entertainment community. After her time in custody, Angela focused on advocacy work aimed at criminal justice reform, speaking publicly about her experiences and the systemic issues she encountered. Her transformation, although imperfect and often overshadowed by ongoing conflict, revealed a woman determined to take ownership of her mistakes while confronting the people and circumstances she believed contributed to them. Angela Stanton's journey shows how incarceration can shape not only a person's private life, but also their future in the public eye. Her path from inmate to reality personality underscores the complexity of redemption and how easily the past can return to challenge even the strongest attempts at reinvention. 3. Larissa dos Santos Lima. Larissa dos Santos Lima entered the reality television landscape through an international romance series built on the tension, uncertainty, and cultural collision between couples attempting to build new lives together. Her presence on screen was immediately distinctive, fiery, emotional, and unapologetic. Viewers were drawn to her intense reactions, her vulnerability in moments of doubt, and the explosive arguments that became defining elements of her storyline. The cameras captured a woman wrestling with homesickness, cultural shock, and an unstable relationship, but they only hinted at the deeper emotional turmoil that existed beyond the scripted framework of entertainment. According to verified police reports, Larissa's legal troubles emerged through a sequence of domestic incidents that escalated into violence. Officers responding to calls at her residence documented scenes marked by emotional distress, visible injuries, and property damaged during heated confrontations. Witness accounts described arguments that intensified quickly, fueled by miscommunication, fear, and the strain of living under constant public scrutiny. These episodes revealed a pattern of volatility that went far beyond the dramatic flair she displayed on television. One of the most serious incidents occurred when officers arrived to find Larissa visibly shaken and her partner bearing injuries consistent with physical contact. The tension in the home was palpable, and attempts to de-escalate the situation highlighted the emotional instability driving the conflict. This event, combined with earlier domestic calls, forced authorities to take decisive action. The police reports, photographs, and statements collected at the scene formed a clear basis for legal intervention, showing a cycle of conflict that could no longer be chalked up to relationship stress alone. As the case advanced into the courtroom, prosecutors emphasized the repeated nature of these confrontations and the potential danger they posed. Defense attorneys pointed to Larissa's mental and emotional distress, the cultural barriers she faced, and the intense pressure of becoming a public figure overnight. They argued that her behavior was influenced by anxiety, isolation, and the overwhelming challenge of adapting to a new life under public scrutiny. The judge acknowledged these factors but ultimately determined that accountability and structured intervention were necessary. Larissa's sentence included a period of confinement and mandated counseling aimed at addressing the behavioral patterns that had contributed to the domestic incidents. During this time, she began working with mental health professionals to confront the emotional triggers and unresolved trauma that had fueled her reactions. Later interviews revealed a woman who had gained insight into her struggles, but continued to carry the weight of the past. Larissa dos Santos Lima's story highlights the hidden consequences of fame for individuals who enter the reality world unprepared for its emotional intensity. Her fall from televised romance to legal confinement underscores how deeply unresolved trauma, cultural shock, and public exposure can intersect, creating a volatile environment where even small conflicts can escalate into life-altering events. 2. Jeffrey Paschel entered the reality television world through a series centered on cross-cultural relationships, where emotional intensity, uncertainty, and human vulnerability often unfolded in front of millions. On camera, Jeffrey presented himself as calm, grounded, and confident a man with life experience, resilience, and a desire for a fresh start. His composed demeanor, steady voice, and unwavering self-assurance shaped a narrative in which he appeared rational and in control. Yet away from the scripted moments and carefully edited scenes, Jeffrey carried a past filled with volatility and accusations that were far more serious than anything portrayed on television. According to verified police records and court documents, Jeffrey's legal downfall stemmed from a violent domestic incident involving a partner. Officers responding to the scene found visible injuries, signs of a struggle throughout the property, and a victim who reported being physically attacked and restrained. Photographs taken that night documented the extent of the harm, including bruises and abrasions that aligned with the account given to investigators. These findings painted a stark contrast between Jeffrey's calm public persona and the allegations unfolding behind closed doors. As investigators continued their work, additional statements from previous partners emerged, each outlining similar patterns of control aggression and emotional manipulation. Prosecutors later emphasized these accounts to establish a history of behavior rather than an isolated incident. Court filings described earlier episodes involving physical altercations, threats, and attempts to intimidate those who challenged him. The consistency between these testimonies became central to the case, revealing a pattern of conduct that contradicted the image he projected to viewers. In the courtroom, Jeffrey denied the accusations and insisted that the events had been misrepresented. However, prosecutors presented medical assessments, witness timelines, and detailed testimony that reinforced the credibility of the victim's statements. Forensic examinations supported the physical evidence, while the court highlighted the severity of the violence described. After reviewing the full scope of the case, the judge determined that the behavior at issue posed a grave risk and required a substantial custodial sentence to ensure the safety of the individuals involved. Jeffrey's incarceration became one of the most publicized scandals in the franchise's history. Cast members, commentators, and viewers expressed shock at the extent of the violence revealed during trial, noting the dramatic contrast between the man shown on television and the behavior documented in court. His storyline was removed from future programming, and the network distanced itself from the controversy. Jeffrey Paschel's fall demonstrates how reality television can obscure far more than it reveals. His case highlights the dangers of public personas that mask deep-rooted violence, and it serves as a stark reminder that charisma on camera can hide patterns of harm that only legal intervention can fully expose. 1. Todd Herzog. Todd Herzog first became known to the public through a competitive adventure series that placed ordinary people in harsh environments where strategy, endurance, and psychological resilience determined who advanced. His calm voice, quiet strength, and ability to navigate shifting alliances made him a standout contestant. Many viewers saw him as thoughtful, composed, and emotionally aware, someone able to rise above chaos with a steady sense of purpose. His success on the show earned him admiration and a reputation for intelligence and adaptability. Yet once the cameras stopped recording, Todd faced internal battles far more difficult than any televised challenge he had ever encountered. According to verified reports and documented accounts from both authorities and those close to him, Todd's life after the show became increasingly shaped by addiction. What began as attempts to cope with stress eventually escalated into a dependency that eroded his emotional stability, strained relationships, and led to repeated crises. Over time, his struggles became visible during public appearances, where slurred speech, unsteady posture, and disorientation signaled a deeper problem. Friends and family urged him to seek help, but the cycle of relapse and deterioration continued, drawing concern from those who had once celebrated his success. One of the most serious incidents occurred when officers responded to a call regarding a disturbance involving Todd in a public setting. Reports described him as severely impaired, visibly distressed, and unable to follow basic instructions. Witnesses recounted erratic movements, emotional outbursts, and signs of acute disorientation. The situation posed a risk both to Todd and those nearby, prompting law enforcement to intervene. This event, combined with earlier episodes, demonstrated a pattern of dangerous behavior that left authorities with no option but to detain him for his own safety and the safety of others. As his case moved through the legal system, prosecutors emphasized the repeated nature of these crises and the harm caused by his deteriorating condition. Defense arguments centered on Todd's long-standing battle with addiction and the intense pressure of transitioning from a celebrated reality winner to someone struggling to maintain control over his own life. The judge recognized the severity of his dependency and concluded that a period of confinement paired with mandatory treatment was the most effective way to address the ongoing danger. While in custody, Todd entered rehabilitation programs focused on detoxification, emotional regulation, and long-term recovery strategies. Counselors noted that the structure and stability of the programs helped him confront the underlying trauma and anxiety that had driven his addiction. Public updates following his release suggested moments of clarity, renewed determination, and a deeper understanding of his condition. Todd Herzog's story reveals how the struggles hidden behind a calm, competent exterior can escalate into crises that demand legal intervention. His journey from celebrated competitor to detainee underscores the painful reality that addiction, when left untreated, can overpower even the strongest individuals, and that survival in everyday life may be the hardest challenge of all. The stories in this countdown reveal a reality that exists far beyond what viewers see on screen. Fame can magnify confidence, amplify emotion, and disguise instability, but it cannot prevent the slow unraveling that happens when deep personal struggles go unaddressed. For each of these individuals, the cameras captured only fragments, moments shaped by editing, performance, and the pursuit of entertainment. Yet the choices made away from the spotlight carried consequences that no production team could soften or rewrite. These downfalls remind us that reality television often shows characters, not full lives. The pressures of sudden visibility, public judgment, and unresolved trauma can push even familiar faces into dangerous spirals, and once legal consequences arrive, the divide between on-screen persona and real-world behavior becomes impossible to ignore. Before you leave, I want to hear from you which of these stories surprised you the most, and why do you think reality fame leads some people toward self-destruction instead of stability? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your perspective helps shape the next investigation inside Hollywood's hidden room.